Hello everyone, and welcome to Capitol Watch for Friday, January 27th, our look at legislative developments in Jefferson City. And joining us for this discussion is our Associate Executive Director for Advocacy, Mike Reed. And Mike joins us from our governmental relations offices in Jefferson City. And Mike, things are up and running for the 2017 session of the General Assembly. But before we talk about specific bills being considered, let's talk about the governor and his State of the State address that he delivered recently. And he covered some important education issues in that address, didn't he?
Yes, he really did. And things have gotten off to a flying start. It's very interesting. This is the first new governor we've had in 8 years. And this is a person who is new to Jefferson City and to government as we know it. So things are off to a very interesting start. The governor in his State of the State address stated that he wanted to make sure that we had good public education. And he said the best thing that we have, which we agree with, is that we have outstanding students in the state of Missouri. He then went on to criticize public education and said we are the lowest in the United States. I disagree with him on several occasions. We have one of the highest rates of graduation in the United States. We have a low rate of paying our teachers, and yet we are above average in various institutions and in various ways in which to look at public education. We have a ways to go, but we are not the dredges of education, and we have something to be very proud of in this state. The governor also stated that he wants to look at educational savings accounts, which in fact are, in essence, vouchers, public money to be used for certain situations. He wants to use educational savings accounts for students with disabilities. It's something to be discussed and looked at, but we believe such bills could be harmful for public education. The good thing that he did say, he said he did want to make sure that the teachers' pensions would be left alone. And the pension situation is something that's very important to our employees. And he also stated that there's some questions on the budget this year. So it was a very interesting discussion in his State of the State address, and it presents challenges to make sure that this governor and the members of the General Assembly understand that we have good public education in the state of Missouri. We have been too often maligned and knocked down that education is poor in this state, and that's simply just not true. We do a good job of educating our children. There are times we can do better, but there are numerous districts in this state that are very high performing and have done a wonderful job in preparing students for life in college or in the job market.
Mike, you mentioned the issue of education savings accounts, and we actually have had at least one hearing already on a bill that would establish those accounts, and you were mentioning that essentially plans like that amount to vouchers, and that whole voucher issue does seem to have some momentum in this session of the General Assembly, doesn't it?
It does, both nationally and at the state level. The voucher issue is a growing issue in the quote choice question. Educational savings account as presented so far in the state of Missouri are in fact tax credits. It's a $25 million tax credit, which is in essence, and that's a minimum. It takes away $25 million from the general revenue at a time when we have a budget shortfall. And it would allow parents to take money or get scholarships through a scholarship agency of some type, which is kind of a real question, and then can take that money and take it to various private schools, et cetera, throughout the state. It is, in fact, a voucher program. And we have to go back to the very basic nature of, do our members want to have vouchers and public money going to various private educational institutions? That has always in the past been something that we have worked very strongly against.
And Mike, our main point on that, of course, is that we'd have nothing against private schools, but private schools should not be receiving any kind of public subsidy because they're simply not accountable to the public in the same way our public schools are.
That is correct. We believe that people have every right to send their children to private schools, and we encourage people to look at what fits best in their situation. However, just by the definition, public money goes to public schools, and private schools do not have to face the same situations and the same requirements as public schools. It has always been, we just believe that is what's best for students.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about funding a little bit, Mike. And as we're recording this program, the governor has yet to announce publicly his budget proposal for the next fiscal year. So we're waiting on that at this point. However, we do know that the state's budget is going to be quite tight for the new fiscal year, isn't it? And that, of course, will affect school funding.
That is correct. As we are recording, the governor has not yet dropped his budget. We expect it very shortly. The budget committees in both the House and the Senate have been meeting, and in discussion with members of those committees, it is very, very tight. The budget, there's a lot of ask for money from general revenue, and it's just not there this year. I think schools are going to have to be prepared to look very closely at the amount of money that they receive from the state of Missouri, because it's going to be a very tight year, and hard decisions are going to have to be made by the members of the budget committee. Very hard decisions on what programs get either cut or reduced funding, certainly not increased funding.
Another issue, Mike, that appears to have some momentum, and we've already seen some legislation introduced on it, is the expansion of charter schools in our state. And of course, right now, charter schools are limited to St. Louis and Kansas City, although local school boards can charter schools. But these bills would expand the sponsorship of charter schools throughout the state, and that's of concern to us, isn't it?
It is. There's a big push to expand charter schools into all accredited districts, and those charter schools would not be sponsored by the local elected school board. They would be sponsored by outside groups. The school board was elected by the local people to manage public education in their district. This would take away that responsibility and give to some unnamed board, either residents or not residents of the state, and it will reduce the amount of money that goes to the public schools. I understand charters are public schools, however, they're not accountable in the same way as school boards have with the schools that they are responsible for. So there's a big push for expansion of charter schools. Again, the question is choice. Parents should have the choice to send them to which schools they want. But charter schools are not accountable in the same way as public schools are. So it's something to be looked at and to be discussed with your representatives and senators to see where they stand on the expansion of charter schools.
Mm-hmm. Another issue, Mike, under consideration deals with virtual education and the expansion of that. What are some of those proposals?
Well, some of those proposals are, in essence, to have virtual charter schools. We believe in virtual education. Virtual education is the coming wave of the future and something we need to embrace. We have to make sure that these virtual classes, though, are taught by qualified teachers and meet Missouri standards and are just not fly-by-night situations. So virtual education is best expanded through the local public schools.
And Mike, of course, as we work our way through this session of the General Assembly, it's critical for school board members throughout the state to remain engaged in these issues and remain in contact with their local legislators. And one way they can do that is through our annual legislative forum, which is coming up on February 14th in Jefferson City. And that's an important event, isn't it?
It's extremely important. It's even more important this year than it has been in the past. We need to have our people down here, our local elected school board members, come to Jefferson City and talk to their counterparts, the representatives and senators. They all share the same constituency. They all stand for election. And tell the representatives and senators how their actions affect you in your operation of your school. It's extremely important. It's extremely important to come down for that and to come down at other times and talk and discuss what is going on in Jefferson City. The best lobbyists we have are the local elected school board members, and I need your help.
All right, Mike Reed, thank you so much for being with us and your good work in Jefferson City. And we will keep you informed during this legislative session in various ways, including this program, our weekly Legislative Voice electronic newsletter that our members receive every Friday, through our Twitter feed, daily updates there, and through critical issue alerts when warranted, whenever it's important for you to contact your legislators. So we appreciate your involvement in our advocacy work here at the Missouri School Boards Association. And we thank you for joining us on this edition of MSBA's Capitol Watch.